lot of people think PR is a lot easier than it is. I always teach people how to do it instead of just doing it for them. It's really understanding the nuances and differences between public relations, marketing, and advertising, and then how they need to work together.
Join Panita where we talk on the Techful Founder podcast. Empower your startup journey as a non-technical founder with actionable insights from successful entrepreneurs. Today, we are thrilled to have Ronjini Joshua with us with over 20 years of experience in public relations. Ronjini has worked with countless startups and major brands alike. She's the founder of her own successful PR agency and has a knack for turning complex communication challenges into stories that captivate and engage. Get ready to dive into the intricacies of PR with an expert who's all about empowering startup journeys. So, what's the biggest PR mistake that most startup founders make when trying to get media coverage?
I think one of the mistakes that they make is that they aren't prepared with the story. And so they don't have their message clear. They jump all over the place. They don't do enough preparation. So having a very clear message is very important. I talk to startups about this all the time, and it they have a very clear vision, I think, but sometimes they don't put pen to paper. And so it's not written out in a way. You need that 1 minute pitch for investors, just like you need it for media. And so you need to know what you want to say and what you want the call to action to be. But when working with the media, you have to frame it in a more storied format. Just having your story down before you get to speaking with the media is very important, and making sure that you have a very clear call to action for everybody, as well as solving a very direct problem.
So, you would say storytelling is one of the key components.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, you've worked with over 100 startups. What's the first step that a founder should take even before thinking about PR?
Yeah, so I work with founders at all stages. And I think, again, messaging is like a very big step. Making sure you have very clear, consistent messaging for not just PR purposes, but marketing purposes, sales purposes, and aligning the team within those messages. And so that's number one. You should have very clear, consistent messaging across those different departments, to make sure that you're saying the same thing consistently over and over again. And that in itself builds credibility. Laying the foundation for PR or marketing very early is really important. And so I think that's where everybody should start, is with, you have maybe 3 or 4 target audiences. What is the message for each one of those audiences? And what is the call to action for each of those?
So, ensuring coordination between all the social media platforms, making sure that when other people on the outside they look and they see something that's consistent.
Yeah. And not just social media, but website, LinkedIn, like LinkedIn is social media, but like website, anything that you write, any content that you create and put out, press releases, marketing materials, when you go to events, all of those things should have some kind of familiar voice that sounds very similar to each other.
Definitely. So, you say that great PR starts with a strong story. What makes a founder story irresistible to journalists?
It's different for everyone. So that's the beauty of it, but also the challenge of it. So I think it needs to be authentic. And I know that word is used so much, but it needs to be something that's very representative of that founder. The more personal, the better, obviously. If you had a personal challenge with something and this product, solution, company helped you overcome that, then that's a great way to talk about it. I think that personal connection is something that media look for often. Obviously, innovation is something that people are looking for, especially in the tech space. So you're looking for something that's never been done before. And we always say, is it first, better, or best? What is the storyline for that? Making sure that you're creating that kind of narrative of, why in the first place are you even doing this? Why is it important? So asking all the why questions and answering those questions, because I think sometimes founders get lost in their own narrative of what they think is happening with the product. And so they'll say, oh yeah, we're the best, or we're the only, or we're the first, but they're coming from a lens of internally. So you really have to make sure you have a good grasp on the market and make sure you know what's going on around you, to be able to say, when someone comes to you and says, hey, no, these people are already doing this. You have something to say that really reflects that you have an expertise or subject matter expertise in the area. So the storytelling foundation should be authentic and personal, but then it does need to be technical and factual as well. You need to have proof points. And so that's one of the things that founders often have trouble with in the early stage is having that credibility, that proof point. Yes, you're going to need a customer at some point, or you're going to need an investor to validate you, somebody who can just say that you're great. That's not just you.
So, what do you think it's the line between a personal story and a story that is perhaps too personal? How do you ensure as a founder you're able to build credibility and also remain authentic at the same time?
Yeah, I think that depends on each founder. And you can usually tell how conservative someone is pretty quickly, but it's whatever you're comfortable with. Honestly, I think the more deep you can go, the better and more unique it's going to be because it's very personal to you. However, it doesn't have to be, people don't have to share their whole lives. Some people don't want to do that. That's not their personality. So I would say just go as far as your personality will let you go and do it in a place where you feel safe as well, because once you've said something, you cannot take it back. And that's another big thing I tell founders also. Nothing is off the record. If you're going to say something, if it's going to come out of your mouth, just know that someone's going to write it down and roll with it. And so you also have to be very careful. That's why it's so important to create the narrative and the story before you go into these media interviews, because yeah, once you start saying it, people are not going to stop using it. Even if you think it's a little thing, they might pick up on something that they think is interesting and run with it.
So, just making sure you have that messaging down just before you go to the press.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what's something about PR that startup founders completely misunderstand, and what should they do instead?
Sure. A lot of people think PR is a lot easier than it is. And I think I don't say this to say that you have to hire a PR person. I truly believe anybody can do public relations themselves. We have a course of DIY PR. I always teach people how to do it instead of showing them just doing it for them. But I think it's really understanding the nuances and differences between public relations, marketing, and advertising, and then how they need to work together as well. That's another big component of it. Public relations is not going to solve all your problems. Marketing is not going to solve all your problems, and advertising is not going to solve all your problems by themselves. These are really like a communication package. It's like something you have to do a little bit of each. So you have to understand the role of each one. And what I usually say is that marketing is like you selling, right? You're advertising, selling, you're telling people how great you are. Public relations is somebody else telling people how great you are. Advertising is you screaming from the rooftops, hey, this is what we do. These are all the things that we provide, and this is all the value we provide. So I would say marketing and advertising are a little bit more closely aligned. Oh, and then of course we have social media, and social media is starting to engage in that two-way conversation with your customer. So see how they're the same, but they're a little bit different. Public relations really gives you that third party validation. So if you're doing PR and media, it's not always that you're going to get immediate sales. And that's especially in the enterprise side. I do both B2B and B2C. And so on the enterprise side, it's really a validation factor. It's when your sales team goes out to sell your product, then you can say, oh, yeah, and by the way, we were in Forbes. Or by the way, we had a story in Wall Street Journal. We'd love to send it to you. Or by the way, we had a story in TechCrunch, or whatever publication is meaningful to you. It's that third party credibility. And then it's just really good to be able to have those things in line when you're doing the selling process. And so it's more of a reputation building, reputation management. Right now, we're doing a lot of thought leadership. Like this podcast is really thought leadership, right? I think it's really making sure you understand that public relations component is a supplement to everything else. And you need to know that you have to factor that into the whole communications. I call it like just the integrated communications foundation of your company. And it's really important to have all those pieces. And like I said, you could do it yourself, but just make sure you know what each purpose is for each one.
Definitely. So, making sure it's all integrated because public relations alone would not work if no one can find your social media as well.
Right, exactly. Exactly, absolutely.
So, if a startup has zero PR budget, what's the most effective thing that they can do to start getting press?
Yeah, I teach this in our DIY. We have a master class that we just launched. It's called the PR Playbook. And the best thing you could do is start by building a foundation. So, number one, everybody should have a press kit. So, that's something I find maybe too often that people don't have a press kit. And that's where we start. Any company I work with, we start with a press kit, which is basically about the founder, so bios, headshots, about the company, and if it's a product, if it's a consumer or hardware product, then it's a product sheet. If it's a software or enterprise product, then it's about the product or about the solution, always with high resolution images and screenshots, some visualizations on what the product is and what it does, how it serves the market. So the press kit is the number one thing. We talked about how messaging is important. So I just do like a messaging sheet where I have these messaging messages. You could use a spreadsheet. It's a messages laid out and say, okay, this is the target audience, this is the message, and this is the call to action for that particular target audience. That way you know the flow. And then your team also knows the flow, the gist of what you want to say every single time, the building the consistency. And then to get into the media, what I would say is I would say the easiest thing to do for a startup that you're just trying to figure things out is look at your competitors. Who is covering your competitors? And there's always some kind of perceived competitor in the market. So either your keywords, your space, or your competitors, find out which journalists are covering them and start following those journalists. Start commenting on their articles. It's pretty easy these days. You don't need a professional PR platform to find their information. A lot of their information is on X or LinkedIn. So you can find these people. It's not difficult, but see who's covering your competitors, start writing those journalists down and following them. Introduce yourself on LinkedIn. Maybe you're sending them a little LinkedIn note or something like that. Don't be afraid to do that. But if you are going to send somebody a LinkedIn note, be prepared to tell them what you do and who you are and why you're even contacting them. So I would start there. Maybe start with a list of 10 journalists and start following them and maybe engaging in a conversation. But I will say, know, you have a few opportunities to make a good first impression. So know what you're going to say when you talk to them. Don't
Yeah.
just run into it blindly. Make sure that you know what they cover, what kind of stories they cover, that they're the right person, because that's the big problem, and going to the wrong person. And that when you are ready to engage with them, that you have some value to give them because they have a job too. And their job is to get coverage and eyeballs on their coverage and drive traffic to their articles. So give them a reason of why you're going to help them do that. It's not about you. It's about them and you working together in a collaboration. So how can you help them and how can they help you? It's like a two-way street. So just think about it from that perspective. I think too often I hear founders say, I have a great story. Someone should tell it. Okay. Or this is what I hear often is that, oh, they covered this other company and that company isn't a big deal. Okay, but they covered them. So you have to find a way to get noticed on top of that company and what that other company is saying. And it doesn't always work like that. And it's always not calling in a favor. It's really about building those relationships and understanding what that media person is actually interested in writing. Another thing to think about too is just watching out for trends. So, news, things that's coming out, things people are saying. If you can piggyback on a trend. So, for an example, we work with cybersecurity, a couple cybersecurity companies. And so we watch when there's data breaches and different scams and things like that, phishing attacks that come out in the news, because then we can respond to those from our expert perspective. And so then we'll generate a response and send it to the reporters when they're covering those types of topics. So that's the benefit of following these media in advance is that you can see that they're coming out with stuff and maybe sometimes you can respond to what they're already saying. And then they start realizing, oh, hey, maybe this person is an expert in something or they're a thought leader or maybe we should cover them. Building that kind of relationship and giving them that kind of information is a really great way to get your feet wet in doing media relations. I would say if you are a founder, there's a platform called Quoted. And if you create a profile there, it's free. And it's a really great way to connect with journalists and what they're writing. And there is a free version of it. So anybody can go on there. And it's Quoted, Quoted. So I would say look into that resource, build out your profile, and that's a great place to start.
Awesome. So I really liked what you said about building a relationship because I think these days with the rise of AI, it's so easy to just think about just sending all these emails that
Yeah.
all look exactly the same, assuming that people would reply.
Yeah. No. I always tell people if you wouldn't open it, then that person's probably not going to open it. So test it on yourself to see if you would open it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, how should founders approach journalists without coming across as spammy or desperate?
I think understanding what they cover first is number one. If you look at their X profile or their LinkedIn profile, you can find a lot about people. Like we're in a digital world. If you look at Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, you can see what they post and tap into that. Tap into the types of coverage that they post. On LinkedIn, you can see what college they went to. Do they go to the same college as you? Do they have similar hobbies? Sometimes people write about their extracurricular or recreational hobbies on some of those platforms. So tap into that, like tap into the human element of that reporter. And I actually just said this weekend in a boot camp, I was saying, hey, journalists are people too. Just like someone would appeal to you, appeal to them. A long time ago, it's a long time ago, I wrote a pitch based on the reporter was a Wall Street Journal reporter. And on their profile on X, which was Twitter back then, so this is how long it was, they said that they were like a Justin Bieber fan or something like that. And so I used that to get in the door and said something like something about being a believer and just something completely silly. But he responded to me right away and he was like, "Oh, you caught my attention. What do you need?" And it was just like very short like that, how quickly we had that relationship. And so now he remembers me as that person now. So you could do that. There's also dangers of getting too personal. So be careful. I've also done the other one where I got too personal with someone. I found out they had a pet and we were actually doing a pet product. We were working on a pet product. And so I found out they had this pet and I talked about the pet and the pet just passed away and it was, like, not a good situation. And so you just have to be careful how personal you get and how accurate the information is that you're running off of. But, yeah, I think doing a little bit of research, you turn into a little bit of an investigative reporter when you are a PR person. That's what we do. We find people, we find out information about them, and we find out how to talk to them. And so you're essentially doing the same thing.
Definitely. So, it's all about building those relationships and getting personal, but not too personal, and ensuring that it's up to date.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
You talk a lot about thought leadership. How can a founder become a go to expert in their industry through PR?
Yeah, this is a great thing. Start writing. I think that's like the first thing is just start writing, whether it's on a blog, Medium, LinkedIn. I think one day I woke up and I had some crazy amount of followers on LinkedIn. I wasn't even trying, but I was posting regularly. I did that. There's that project everyone does with like, can you post every day for 30 days? Like things like silly things like that. But actually, it's a great exercise in really understanding what you want to say to an audience. And so for me, when I do those kinds of exercises, it's really about teaching people about public relations because working with startups, I found that a lot of people misunderstand public relations and what it is. And so usually when I'm posting something, it's about educating people on how to use it, when to use it, why to use it, that kind of stuff. So I think starting to maybe do a project like that, like post for the next 30 days on LinkedIn. It doesn't have to be super long. It could be a short one. I also like to tell people to vary the type of content. So it could be short posts, it could be videos, it could be audio. That's I think when Clubhouse came out, that was the first time I was like, "Oh, let me experiment more with this kind of stuff," because Clubhouse was just audio only, and so it was a very different format for me, and I was like, "This is really interesting," and there's a lot of people who just love that audio only format, and then I was like, "I'm sure somebody likes video too," and I know video is a little daunting because people do not want to be seen, or, like, they are very judgmental of what they look like, but the more you do it, the less scary it is. So, just start writing. If I would say start writing because writing is probably the easiest thing to do with the least amount of visibility, and I usually say start writing, like, 1 blog a month, and then go to 2 blogs a month, and then see if you can maybe post once or twice a week on social media and just build that way. But thought leadership is built on the fact that you are saying something useful in your industry repetitively. And so, even though it might be a little repetitive to you, it's not to everybody else. And so, be mindful of that. I think your self concept is a lot different than what other people are seeing. And also, it really shows that you are committed to that particular vision. So, pick a theme, and you know what I end up doing now, obviously we have Chat GPT and AI, is really if you pick a theme, say, "Hey, what are 5 different angles I can write about this particular topic?" And Chat GPT will tell you what you could do, and then you could just expand on those 5 different angles, but it's the same topic. So you're validating that you're an expert in that topic, but in different types of ways, in different voices, or maybe different, like you're coming from different angles. It could be that you're addressing your different target audiences. My advice is just start writing for thought leadership, and writing is the easiest and best way to go. LinkedIn is great for enterprise. Instagram is great for Instagram. I'm not going to say TikTok because there's so many confusion around what's happening there. Instagram is a great way to go for consumer side, or if your audience lives on Facebook, if you're a local business, a small retailer or something like that, usually the Facebook is the place to go. So it really depends on where your audience lives. Find that out first and then just start producing content. And as you produce content, you're going to fine tune what you're saying. And then once you've got that down, then you can go for the bigger fish. Then you can go into writing for Forbes, or writing an op ed, or doing podcasts, or doing other speaking types of things that will further validate your credibility. But start small because you'll see that, oh, wait, I don't want to say it this way. I'm going to say it that way. So, like, those things will change over time, and then you'll get much better at it. Like, I don't practice anything these days. I know exactly what I'm gonna say. I might practice the flow, but I've been doing this so much that now I already have my groove, and I can tell you, we talk a lot about DIY PR or startup PR, or that's usually the direction I go in. You'll be able to build that, but yeah, just get started over time and don't overcommit yourself. That's another mistake somebody could make, is that they're gonna be like, "I'm gonna write a blog every week," and then you start getting behind, and it makes you upset. "Oh, shoot, I'm behind." So just give yourself 1 a month and then build on that.
I really like what you said about starting small because it could feel really daunting to put yourself out there, especially
Yeah.
for newer founders, and just ensuring that you get that momentum in, and then and eventually you'll get there.
Yeah, and it's not gonna be immediate, but you'll see maybe you post your first thing and then someone DMs you or something and, "Hey, I really love your blog." And that feels good. That's like a little bit of
Yeah,
validation. So then you can build on those little wins. So remember, every piece of feedback is very good usually, even if it's criticism.
definitely. So many startups struggle with fundraising. How can PR help a founder attract investors and build trust?
Yeah, so like I said, PR is really built on credibility and reputation. And so typically when a company is fundraising, either before, during, or after, we do PR actually in all of those stages. And the before side is really building the narrative, the story, the foundational storytelling, and start telling people, "Hey, this is where we're coming from, this is where we're going, this is what we're doing." And trying to get your story out there in that way. And maybe some of those blogs, those early blogs, can be part of that foundational part. And that's PR too. Just posting on LinkedIn could be a PR thing. During fundraising, it's getting that extra bit of validation from larger reporters. third-party credibility, maybe analysts for some industries, getting in touch with Gartner or Forrester or one of those guys to say, hey, I'm the hype cycle or I'm a cool vendor. And so that really helps with especially investors because they want to see that kind of momentum, right? They want to see that you're building a buzz about yourself. And so investors really like to see that. And then once we've raised, like right now, I'm getting ready to do a seed announcement. And that seed announcement is being validated by being covered in with a press release. So we're going to do a press release and then we have a story coming out in maybe TechCrunch or a story in VentureBeat or maybe it's The Verge or the Next Web, whatever your audience is pitching those reporters to tell them your story and further validate that their investment basically. And the reason you want to do that and follow your rounds up with those kinds of media is because you probably want them to invest again. And you probably want them to have some kind of trust and them building their trust in you so that they can continue to work with you. Getting out there shows the investors that you're serious. And that's what investors want to see. They want to see that you're serious. They want to see that you're committed to your own proposition, right? So a lot of times investors are looking to see, hey, did you invest any money yourself? Are you just looking for my money? Or are you also investing your own money? That kind of thing, even though your time is also money, right? And then they also want to see, okay, they're putting the idea out there and other people are interested, right? Investors are looking for traction. They want to see that there is an opportunity for growth. And so the PR often gives you that visibility, especially when it's a consumer product, but even sometimes when it's an enterprise product, and then you are able to tell your story in a way where the media are like, oh, yeah, this is a problem and you guys are solving it. Investors like to see that level of like credibility and just it's a security blanket almost.
Yeah. Someone from the VC space come on this podcast and he said investors are looking for traction and track record. And I think PR helps to cover both of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're giving them what they want at different stages. Yep.
Definitely. So if a startup gets negative press or a PR crisis, what's the best way to turn it around?
That also depends on if it's true, right? And what kind of response you have. So if you do get negative press, and I've dealt with that. I've been doing this for 20 years. First things first is we need to build a response to that. What is our response? Are we correcting somebody? Is it negative because it's wrong? So that's the first thing. Or is it negative because it's right and now we have to repair something? And usually it's about getting in contact with that reporter right away and telling them our side of the story. And if you, as the brand or the founder, are wrong, the apologies are usually imminent. You have to do apologies right away and then course correct. So, what is the course of action you're going to take to fix the problem? Or an explanation. And I am not a big fan of explaining yourself too much because the more you explain yourself, the more people poke holes in your stories. So, really, it's really giving them a very concise this is what happened. This is what we're going to do next. And this is how we're going to move into the future. And just leave it at that. And then when trolls come for you, usually you can close comments or you're going to have to ignore a lot of stuff. And that's the problem with social media today. It's very hard to ignore negative comments and things like that. People find your email and they'll come at you directly. And even if an email exchange can be volatile, right? So you have to be careful what you say in email too. If you don't know somebody, there's no reason to respond to them. If it's a journalist who's picking a fight, which they usually don't without some kind of proof, because they have a code of ethics they have to follow. And so it's all about having your ducks in order and having your I don't want to say your version of truth, but what is the truth? Knowing exactly what the truth is, how you're going to address it, and how you're going to move forward. And I think that's one of the biggest things that PR can help you do is move forward past the challenge or the problem or the crisis. So it's really about position yourself to get past that crisis. And so I think it's really important to address any challenges like that with integrity. I've been faced with a few different crisis in my time doing this. I don't do crisis PR, but every PR person has to be prepared for that. And I think it's really just, again, take a very high level look at the what's going on, have a solution to the problem, address it head on if you're wrong and just admit it, and then have that next step. What is the next step going to be and how are you going to move past it? And I think every company should have this contingency plan of, okay, who's going to approve these messages and who's going to be our spokesperson when a crisis happens? And then how are we going to come to an agreement on what to say next? And so that's always we usually just call it a crisis response team, but you'll have somebody who works on messaging, somebody who's a executive spokesperson, and maybe someone who's technical if it's a technical problem. Like, how are we addressing this technical problem? So it's just be very human and tactical about it. I think it's just about laying out the facts. And if the more you can stick with the facts, the less drama you're going to get into, unless that's something you want, right? In entertainment, you want drama and you have that sensational entertainment factor. But in tech, you don't really want drama, I don't think.
Yeah. Unless you're looking to go into entertainment.
Unless you're making a transition. Exactly.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about why you shouldn't over explain, because that really can make people kind of poke holes, and just ensuring that you apologize and course correct if you're wrong.
Yeah. And then you also get flustered, right? You're a human. It's not like you're a robot. It's like once start people saying stuff, they get in your head. It's like just make a decision and move forward. And the quicker that you move forward yourself, the better it's going to be, because you don't want to keep revisiting a problem. It's just going to keep you in that problem for a long time.
Definitely. So you've built your own agency and worked with major brands. What's one pivotal moment that shaped your approach to PR?
One pivotal moment. I worked with several agencies before I started my own. So I worked at some big agencies before that in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And then I also worked in-house. So I am lucky. I feel like I'm lucky enough to have gotten experiences from all different areas. Not only did I work at a small agency, I also worked at a large agency and saw what that was like. I also worked in-house as an in-house PR person. So I was able to get to a view of all the different types of PR before I started something. The reason I even started my own agency was on accident, really. It was like I was filling a gap. And there weren't a lot of people working with startups when I started working with startups. And so that's the gap that I was filling. I was like, oh, I'm as a freelancer or a smaller agency, it's probably more economically easy to work with startups who have smaller budgets that can't do like large budgets. So that's how I even ended up starting in this area. So I think, sorry, repeat the question again. I lost my train of thought.
So what's one pivotal moment that
Oh,
shaped
the
your
pivotal
approach to
moment. Okay.
PR? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was not at the beginning. Once I got going, I think it took about 5 years to really find a footing. And people they started calling us stuff like, hey, you're the crowdfunding PR agency. I never really considered myself that, because early on we did a lot of crowdfunding with Kickstarter and Indiegogo and stuff. And I never really thought about that until someone started saying it. And then they're like, oh, you're a startup PR agency. So other people actually ended up defining what we do, like our audiences. And that was, I think, a point where I was like, oh, okay, I need to be nimble enough to go with what's working at that moment. And the media landscape as is really changing all the time. So I think maybe I would say like maybe 5 to 8 years into it, I was like, oh, okay. So in my market, we're going to have to be really flexible. When during my time, it went from PR is not social media to PR is social media as well. So I just kind of show that you have to be really flexible to change. And I think that was like a pivotal, not necessarily one exact moment, but those were like a few little things that showed me that, okay, hey, I'm going to have to be open to trying new things myself as a leader and as a person who's a founder myself, trying new things, pivoting, and startup world is all about pivoting. So that's all we do is like change courses. So then I also apply that to the things that we do for the companies we work with. And I always tell them, hey, we have to be comfortable in pivoting. If a story isn't working, we're going to have to change the story. And so that's, I think, over time, I learned that, and that was, like, some collection of moments that really shaped the way we do business now and the way I look at things is that you have to keep learning new things, and then what happened after that? AI came along, and so people were like, "Oh my god, AI is gonna steal marketing jobs," mostly marketing and creative jobs because they're making it so easy, but that's not really true, and so for a little while, I, like, hesitated to embrace that AI, and then I was like, "Wait, let me just see what's happening." And now my job, it's not easier. It's still being creative is still a human element, but it does expedite things, speed things up a little bit, right? So you can get to the point faster. And so I just noticed like the more open I am to new ideas, trying new things. Like, there was a time where I didn't do videos, and so I tried a video and I was like, "Okay, this is not that bad. Okay, actually it's cool." So, just being open is actually a very big thing is for startups, for PR in general, for anybody in the communications industry, always learning. I think as a leader, you have to keep learning. And it's actually really just a bunch of things I've picked up along the way. It's you just learn it along the way. There was no real defining moment for me that said, "Okay, yeah, this is the way you're gonna move forward, or this is how you're gonna know you're right." You never know. It's always an experiment. And I think in startup world, because I'm in startup world so much over the last 14 years specifically, I'm still in that way where I'm like pivoting or very quick or we're changing routes all the time. Or if something is working, we're sticking to it and we're doubling down. So, yeah, you just have to be open. I think that's a big thing to know, but it takes a little while to get there. Like the first 5 years, I probably didn't know what I was doing.
So ensuring that you're open to change and taking in that user feedback and pivoting when necessary is the reason you're able to be here today.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And I think that's anything, right? Like that applies to everything in life.
Yeah,
I think there was a point where I was like, "Oh yeah, public relations was a great place to go because it teaches you so much about all the different areas of business, but also how to just represent yourself in a regular real life world."
definitely. So have you found that since you've done PR, your in-person interactions have been more enriching in any way?
So I've been doing PR for 20 years. That's a long time. Since college, I graduated with a degree in public relations. And yes, I think I have a knack for communication and definitely am able to I talk to so many different types of people that and because I'm in tech also, I'm able to find like you're finding all the nuggets in what I'm saying. And so it's very similar to that. The more people you talk to, you realize what they're saying a lot faster. And then you're able to communicate them in a better way with them in a better way. And so that's, yeah, definitely a skill that is developed over time is a good listening skill to see what people are actually saying, like taking that out of the conversation and then being able to feed that back to them, respond to them so that they know that you're listening. That's a big thing that PR does because we have to retell stories all the time, and that's what we're doing. So, yes, I think having a background in public relations, even writing, even if you're not a PR person, writing, communicating in any way really helps refine the way you talk to people and how clear you are with what you're saying. And so I definitely think I've always been a talker, but it definitely helps me refine my messages so people understand me and that I'm actually saying what I want to say, not just anything.
Definitely. So it takes a lot of practice to get there.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I know when I start working with some founders and some expert thought leaders and things like that, the first interview we do, I usually do a media training. And so the first interview, they're stiff, right? And they don't want to say anything. But I can see as they get to one interview, two interviews, three interviews, more interactions that they're loosening up. They're getting more comfortable with their own story. And that's what it is. It's just getting comfortable with your story.
Definitely. So for founder listening right now, what's the one PR move that they should make this week to build momentum?
Identify what your expertise is and write something about it. That's the one move.
Awesome. I think this is a great point to finish this podcast on. Write something and then you go and read it.
Put it out there. Yes. Yes. Don't be afraid.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights today, Ronjini. And I'm sure our audience have really enjoyed this podcast.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.